Anyway, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. So this basically shows you the true average weight of going over a certain combat width. So in this case, if you have a 2 combat width division, the maximum penalty you can incur for all terrain types is 0.21%. So you hover over the attack and it'll say combat width exceeded, penalty minus 0.21%. And basically the worst combat width possible is 59. The worst possible combat width is 59 with an overstacking penalty of 27.67. And the second worst is 80 at 27%. I feel like this is a really good way of just illustrating the average penalties if you're trying to get the most optimal. In the past, you could make a 20, a 40 width, or a 10 width, and the overstacking penalty would be 0% because it fits into every terrain type, every single one. But now, the minimum penalty is 0.21%, with the worst being 27.67%. So you guys are going to ask yourself the questions, what the most optimal combat width is. So you've got 10 and 15. People always talk about those all the time. But once again, they're very small, so they suffer from HP penalties, equipment, and manpower losses. Not very optimal. 27 is an old faithful. People really love 27s. Very optimal for attack penalty and defense purposes. And then you've got some of the more org-based divisions. You've got 35 and 34. And then you've got some of the omega fat divisions, which in this case is you've got the 45s, 37. Very big, lots of firepower. I know what you guys are hoping. You want me to say, please, Daddy Dave, just tell me what the number I should go with, and I'll make all my divisions that combat with. Wrong. That is not what HOI4 is about. You are wrong. Stop asking that question. The answer is unfortunately more complex than you would like. Some things in life are more complex than you'd like them to be, okay? You can't simplify the world, okay? You can't say, well, quantum physics is like when things go really fast and go, woo. You can't simplify it that much. You have to realize that some issues are very complex and therefore cannot be answered in simplistic forms. I am so sorry, but that's not it. We're not done, guys. We're not done. How about a complete min-maxing guide for all of HOI4, talking about the mechanics that people don't talk about? By the way, all these links will be available on my Discord. If you want to hop on my Discord, I'll provide those links for you boyos. So let's just summarize it. Some of this you already know, so it's really straightforward. I want to go for the stuff that's the most exciting. So it talks about specifically how the attributes work. I want to talk about reconnaissance, how I feel like I completely misunderstood it and I was wrong and I've changed my mind on that. Guys, it's really healthy, guys. If I could give you some advice for the rest of your life, try and understand the words I don't know are very important. If you don't know something, please just say I don't know. Don't make it something up. Don't guess. If you don't know, understand something, there's a gap in your knowledge. How about you sit down and learn about it, okay? Don't say you know something when you don't. And secondly, when you change your mind, celebrate it. I want you to throw a party every time you change your mind, because evolving and changing as a human being is the most healthy thing you can do. A little bit of information I didn't know about is that every single point of entrenchment gives 2% defense and attack for every 1 point of entrenchment. So if you have 10 entrenchment, you have 20% extra defense and 20% extra soft attack. I didn't know that. That's useful information. So for instance, if you are stacking a lot of entrenchment, you are stacking a lot of soft attack and a lot of defense. Just be aware of that. Just be aware of that. A lot of people have got really confused in my Let's Play why I'm constantly like dropping reliability of planes really low. It turns out you can drop the reliability of planes really low and the chance of actually crashing is still really low. This means that a typical plane at 80% reliability will be able to do 5,000 sorties before dying. So with an 80% reliability, the plane could fly 5,000 missions before dying in a ball of fire as he crashes because the engine failed, which amounts to 1,667 days. So basically, the chance of it happening throughout a HOI4 game is low. Hence the reason why you find that accidents for planes are very, very low at 80%. Now at 60%, it drops to 833 days. At 40%, it drops to 500 days. At 0%, it's 333 days. Know that 100% reliability planes will never die of attrition. Never. Looking at the timescales, plane reliability then can thus be mostly disregarded, as losses due to air combat are typically much higher. Did you read that correctly? I'll read it again. Maybe you didn't hear it. Looking at scales, plane reliability can thus be mostly disregarded. By the way, the guy who wrote this article, I actually spoke to him on voice on my Discord as well. God, the guy's so good. Really is a really good guy. So attrition for divisions, unfortunately, is a little bit different. And you kind of want to find a sweet spot for attrition based on certain reliability numbers. I'm going to see if I can explain this the best I can. So I'll admit, I don't fully understand what he told me, but I took into account what he said and I did a few tests and he was correct. So based on the amount of equipment that's in a division, will determine the most optimal reliability for that division. So for instance, according to this graph, this is reliability and this is the number of equipment in the division. So for instance, if the division has a lot of equipment in it, let's say 200 tanks, you want the reliability to be very high. You don't want to lose tanks. Tanks are expensive too, so getting that mixture between the two is important. Where if you don't have a lot of them in an equipment, you can afford to have the reliability be very, very low. So for an example, support equipment as well as support artillery, not a lot of those get added to a division. So the reliability for those can be very, very, very low. What's the TLDR here? If you're making big, juicy, fat tank divisions, for the most part, you want to be near 100% reliability because you can't afford to lose tanks because they're one, expensive, two, they're very production heavy. But when it comes down to less equipment, overall, you can afford to have less reliability. That's the only take home from this. So to answer the question is, how much reliability do you want on your tank? As much as you can, because at the end of the day, you don't want to burn out reliability, unless it's a very small division like a flame tank, which reliability really doesn't even really matter. The conclusion to draw from this is the attrition effects are very significant, especially for equipment which are the numbers per division is low. The data represents above can be neatly summarized below. The conclusion from this is that for equipment type with a customizable reliability such as tanks, sometimes the reliability does not matter when the number of equipment types is low. For example, light flame tanks company only requires 30 reliability since it only requires 15 light tanks per division. The lower the values, more likely the equipment is suffering from random failures, accidents, and exploding a fiery ball of death with light lip bump. Reliability has no effect above 100%. So here's the question. If it's based on average reliability, could we just basically disregard? It specifically doesn't say that this is attrition specifically just for the vehicle, but in a weird way, it makes sense if it's the average per division. It would make sense if it's the average for every division, because it would be too many calculations in the game, wouldn't it? Like every equipment type for every division in the game, that would be too CPU intensive, wouldn't it? It'd be like way too many calculations happening in one go. It does make me think that if it's an average, it basically don't have a lot of control over it, because it's going to be stuff like motorized, which you can't modify the reliability, artillery, support equipment. There's a lot of different bits you can add on that doesn't affect the reliability. So therefore, the only thing you have control over is the tank. If the division is solely made up of mechs and tanks, I feel like because most of the equipment in that division is those equipment types, I feel like you have a lot of control over the reliability then, don't you? Let's do an experiment. So we'll make a single division, light tank, and the reliability is 78%. That's what we went for. And then we're going to add on a mechanized as well. And the reliability now is 79% because the mechanized has 80, so it's upped the average. So what if we go for reliability, wet ammunition storage? So we're going way over 100% here. And I'm just kind of curious to see how the numbers averages out. 100%, because it doesn't go over 100. So if we reduce this down, let's say to 97, then you add the mechanized on, which is 80%. And therefore it drops it down again, drops it down again. Then you add on support artillery, which is 80%, so it drops it down again. Then you can add on, say, MP, which is support equipment, which is 80%, engineers, 80%. So every time you're adding something on, you're basically dropping it down to roughly equalize about 80%. So if I add a medium tank on now, it's going to up the number, because now I'm increasing the amount of tanks in the division. See, this is the deal. Grisha's brain now is saying, I want to make the most optimal tank division. I don't care about reliability. I just want stats. Give me stats, give me stats, give me stats, give me stats. And I think there's a part of me that agrees with that. But the problem with single player games don't go like multiplayer games. This is a multiplayer game. I'll give you an example. You basically build up to Barbarossa. That's basically the whole game. So build up to Barbarossa. That's all that really matters, all right? And when Barbarossa happens, it's usually decided within like 20, 30 minutes of any multiplayer game, usually resulting in like 5 or 6, 7 or 8 major battles or major conflicts or encirclements. And that's it. The game's basically over. So basically the chance of losing all your equipment during that time period is relatively low. So therefore they don't care about reliability. The difference is in single player games, people play for longer durations. So therefore they're more likely to reach their 1950s, for instance, and maybe even go for a world conquest. In that instance, reliability is very important because you don't want to burn through too much equipment just with raw attrition. That's the difference between single player and multiplayer. Hence the reason why there's a conflict of interest between what I think is optimal and what Grisha thinks is optimal. It does look like if you want to optimize your tanks, it looks to me Like, you want to try and get that reliability as high as you can. It looks to me like if you wanted to go for 100%, like if you wanted a tank that basically didn't have to worry too much about reliability, you'd go for this, and then you'd put it to 100%, I guess. And then potentially you've got a tank division that has, 95. It looks like there's a maximum ceiling. I'll be honest with you, though. If you had 95% reliability on this division, your tank losses are going to be very minimal.